Alright, because finding a way to transition between your levels is hard. Mazin Saga Mutant Fighter. This was a random Genesis game I want to say I was first introduced to on like a video from YouTube 1.0 15 years ago. It probably doesn't even exist anymore. I couldn't tell you even who made it. It was so long ago. But I remember seeing it and immediately being charmed by this game and thinking it looked so cool. And this was published in North America by everyone's favorite gas and electric concern that sometimes delved into game development, Vic Tokai. So you know it's probably gonna be kinda jank, probably not the highest budget, but at least genuinely kind of interesting, as long as we don't talk about any game associated with Kid Kakafu, / Kid Cool, / Psycho Fox, / Decap Attack, / Magical Hat. Yeah, they reused those mechanics for like 5 games and none of them were good. How did that game get so many sequels? Either way. So right after the 2 unobtainable games on my list, Musha and Crusader of Senti, this for the longest time was kind of my most wanted Genesis game. And let me be just clear straight up, it's not that great a game, but I still kind of like it and I still think it's pretty good for what it is. The plot to this game is honestly fairly throwaway. The evil god Hell Kaiser decides to send his minions to destroy the Irath, and that's kinda your lot, but to be fair, the Irath is pretty messed up. I mean, for one thing, all of Paris is a desert for some reason, and outside of the Himalayas, I don't think India sees all that much snow, yet it's entirely covered in this game. Also, all of New York is completely covered in mold, but that's just Tuesday. What is interesting about the story is more its background than anything. This is actually a licensed game that is based on a very, very short-lived series. Specifically, 3 volumes long, which is kind of a shame because if this series had lasted longer, it might have seen substantial amounts of merch, and I would really kill for an action figure of the player character here because he looks freaking awesome. But Mazin Saga as a concept is kind of a combination of 2 separate Go Nagai properties, combining both Mazinga Z with Devilman of all things. Now, I'm not terribly familiar with either of these things besides the fact that, you know, Mazinga Z is Super Robot, and that's about all I know about it. But the idea of combining those 2 things to create sort of a death metal tokusatsu like mecha thing is kind of brilliant, and I love it, and I wish there was substantially more of it other than this game and 3 volumes of a manga. Still, this game and its background are pretty interesting, even if the game story itself is fairly lacking. Now, gameplay-wise, it is a hack and slash beat 'em up. It is fairly fast paced and you have a wide variety of abilities. You can run, you can jump, you can slash, you can jump slash, which gives you like a screw attack. It's honestly more for show than anything, but still pretty cool. You have a super attack that drains a little bit of your health, but allows you to flail wildly in both directions to protect you from all sides. But again, it drains your health, so it's not that great, although there is a power-up that lets you temporarily do this without any consequence. That's rather nice. You can also pick up and throw enemies, and this is very, very useful on levels that have death pits because you'll instantly kill them. Each level is broken up into several stages, usually about 3, and when you get to the end, you magically teleport from one to the other because transitions are hard. But when you get to the end, you realize what this game really is. For you see, this game is actually secretly an international deep cover conspiracy to turn all of the people of this world into foot fetishists. Because for some reason, half the levels end with you fighting giant feet. And then after that, you Megazord up and actually like fight them in proper size where you get to punch them in the face. Now, to be fair, there's actually a reason for this. Having played this game discerned specifically why you have to fight their feet before you actually fight the giant robots. And it's because they all must literally have Achilles heels or something, because the one that lacks heels entirely is basically impossible to kill. More on that in a sec. But effectively, you turn giant and then suddenly it becomes kind of effectively a game of Rock'em Sock'em Robots. In this mode, it is actually very clumsy and slow, and there's a little bit of delay between attacks. You don't really have that many arrows to your bow. You can move around, you can jump, you can attack and block, and near as I can tell, that's about it. A few of your enemies actually have substantially more abilities, but for the most part, it's pretty fair. At least up until the penultimate fight on, I guess I was playing the easy mode or something, because I know there's a couple fights after this. But the penultimate fight on the mode I finished on featured an enemy, which again had no Achilles heel, ergo he was impossible to kill. And yeah, he's a zoner who has about double your range. He has perfect guards, an unbreakable guard, Near as I can tell, he reads your inputs, so he knows exactly when to attack you if you try and get into like a guard standoff with him, and all of his attacks have priority over yours. Effectively, he is better than you in every conceivable way, and outside of finding one kind of weird AI quirk, I couldn't find any way to consistently damage this guy or anything. Like seriously, he hits so hard from so far away, and he can block everything you throw at him. I wasted like 3 continues on this guy. And a continue is like 5 lives, so yeah, like 15 lives on this one guy. And it wasn't until I realized that he doesn't seem to understand that people might follow up a jump attack with a duck attack. Like, he just doesn't seem to register that combination of things, and that was the only way I could get past his guard to actually do consistent damage and ultimately beat him. What's weird is the boss after that was substantially easier, and he had basically your entire moveset plus more, as far as I can tell. Just, it's weird the penultimate fight is so hard. Like, he seriously feels like an SNK boss, reading your inputs and everything. It was rather grim, in a weird moment of the rest of the game being pretty awesome. I mean, it's not a high quality game, it's not the best game ever, but it was a fun game up to that point, and then that one fight was just absolutely miserable. The 2D beat-em-up platforming works really, really well, however. The levels are fairly varied, although they are fairly sparse by design. They're fairly flat, and they don't really feature all that many gimmicks, aside from, you know, a giant foot falling on you or maybe being able to throw an enemy off the cliff. There are a few levels interspersed that allow you to auto-scroll and like run away from giant enemies. That's pretty interesting, and it really does key me in that had this game been a little bit more experimentative in what it was doing and it had pushed the boundaries a little bit more, it would have probably been a substantially better game. But the beat-em-up elements themselves are really, really good and fun. The giant Rock'em Sock'em Robots elements, they're clumsy, but they work fairly well, and aside from that one incredibly dumb boss that is just stupidly hard. Again, I was getting flashbacks to that one really bad fight in Excalibur on the Super Nintendo. That one guy that could just zone you and block everything you threw at him. It's basically the same fight. Aside from that one fight, it was a really, really fun, interesting way to break up the combat. And ultimately, it makes the game feel very varied, and it always feels like something new is coming your way, and I enjoy that greatly. At the end of the day, gameplay-wise, Mazin Saga feels a little underwhelming. What you get, aside from that one fight, is very, very good, but just made me want more, you know? More details, more interesting gimmicks with the stages, more different enemy types, because there's honestly not that many. More combos and different attacks that you could do. Basically more of everything, because I was having an absolute blast with this gameplay-wise. It just feels like, had they had a bit more of a budget to it, it could have gone substantially further and better with it. The overall presentation to Mazin Saga Mutant Fighter is pretty solid. Visually, this game is quite crisp and clean in its beat-em-up sections. When you turn into a giant robot, you look freaking awesome. And there's some really brilliant detail work on this. There are some questionable designs with the robots. For example, the first giant foot you fight is that of a dinosaur, and yet it seems to belong to a giant human skeleton. And then later on you fight a giant dinosaur that has, like, robot feet. I think they might have mixed up which robot has what feet. I'm not sure though. And I was really impressed with how smooth the animation was. Just in general, everything animates really, really well and cleanly. And heck, when you turn to a giant robot, for as slow and clumsy as it is, it does sort of recapture the sort of goofy tokusatsu wearing giant goofy costumes wailing on each other kind of thing that I love. It does feel clunky and clumsy just like those rubber suits are, and honestly I'm a big fan of those, so that's cool to me. That feels like that's more absolutely capturing the feel of what it should be. Audio-wise, the game is okay, but nothing terribly special. Honestly, I remember basically nothing about the soundtrack, but it worked in the situation and it was basically fine. Now, if you want a copy of Mazin Saga Mutant Fighter, cheapest copy I see right now on eBay, shipping included, is about $80, which is a substantially high price for this game. Honestly, like, it looks good, it's kind of goofy, and it's interesting, but it's not that great a game. It's a pretty good game, but it's not great, and I mean, I'd be substantially less negative about this had it not had that one terrible, terrible, terrible fight. But the fact is, for $80, while that is weirdly becoming the norm for most Genesis games I find, that is a huge amount of money for what is effectively kind of a lukewarm, medium-tier title at the best of times. This is a weird thing to collect, and it's neat, and I've always wanted a copy, but it is just not worth almost $100. I would say this is a game that's worth $20, maybe $30 if you're that curious about it, but beyond that, it shouldn't be worth that much, because the fact is, it's not great. I mean, I personally like it, and I've always wanted a copy, but it didn't live up to those expectations of me, you know, waiting 15 years for it, nor did I really expect it to. But the fact is, it's a decent game. And for a little bit of money, Mazin Saga Mutant Fighter would be worth it. However, its lack of polish and ultimately lack of experimentation beyond what it tries to do really does hamper its value to me as a person. I think if it refined what it had and it experimented a bit more and just added more of everything, you'd have a substantially better game that might be worth it. But currently, for that much, I would look for cheaper alternatives if you really want to play Mazin Saga Mutant Fighter. Distance, it completely messes with my inputs. Wow, he just swatted me out of the sky. Okay. Okay, Buster Claw. You get that win. I'm not happy about it, but I'll give you that. You earned that.